All right, guys, welcome back to Danny Rants. Today I have a hip-hop icon and Melbourne club legend, Dave Barrett in the house, owner of Laundry Bar, Bad Decisions, and...
That's it at the moment.
that's it at the moment.
It was up to 4 or 5 venues at one point, but yeah, we're just back at the 2 now. So.
Starting to wind back on it.
Yeah.
So basically, I've invited you down today to go across a bunch of crazy stories, no doubt, and talk about the industry, maybe a little bit about the landscape of where we're at right now. And we'll go through a bunch of different bits and pieces, ups and downs, no doubt.
Yeah.
But I'd love to start with you kind of explaining what you do. So I know I just said before you're, in my opinion, hip-hop royalty. Maybe you could explain what you've done with laundry for the last decade or plus,
Yep.
and everything else you've sort of been working on.
All right, cool. So yeah, I guess with laundry, it's been, I've been there like 13 years in June.
Yeah, wow.
So yeah, we're kind of starting to try to work on a 13-year thing for the middle of the year. In that time, predominantly we've kind of focused on hip hop, rap, and things that are pretty closely associated around that. You know, a little bit of dancehall and a little bit of when the trap kind of stuff was coming through. More recently, we've pivoted a little bit and sort of expanded that out because there's just not as much. I guess, whether it's audience and also performers and things like that. Obviously there was a big gap during COVID in what was touring, and then that put more pressure on local artists to sort of perform more and things like that. And then, it's kind of ended in a
drought almost.
Yeah, a bit of a drought, kind of thing. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff around that. But I've sort of done that, and then just pre-COVID, opened Bad Decisions next door to Laundry. I had another place, George's Bar, further up the road, which I sold last year. Bad Decisions has just kind of been, more open genre kind of format. Nice little cocktail bar and courtyard downstairs, and then 100 cat room upstairs. And that's been doing like really well. And we've just seen that, kind of more, I guess, open format.
You do a lot of live stuff though, right?
We do, it's predominantly live stuff, like 4 nights a week at Bads, but it's like all sorts of stuff, it'll be like, it can be a metal band one night, the other week during Easter, I think we had like Young Marta did a show upstairs, sold out, that Easter weekend we had 3 sold out shows out of 4 nights that were open. So that 100 cap at the moment is, like a really strong kind of number. Seems to be quite a big gap between that and then, bigger numbers. It's sort of like, which is, definitely an interesting issue in the landscape at the moment. So.
Yeah. And we'll go into that later. But when you first started, what motivated you to sort of work in the hip hop space? Was it originally what you were thinking of doing, or did you sort of fall into it?
It was a bit of both, I guess. Like, I'm kind of like, the age that I am and when I grew up, like kind of hip hop and heavy kind of music was, the things at that point. I think the first cassette I ever bought was Motley Crue's Dr. Feelgood, and the first CD I ever bought was Public Enemy's Fear of a Black Planet. So like, those sort of like genres kind of were what I was around. But predominantly, I guess, like my immediate history before opening Laundry was I was the venue manager and general manager of the SB in St Kilda for several years prior to that, and that was kind of pretty heavy in the booking stuff there, and what I kind of fell into, I guess, and then the promoters and agents that I like got along well with and all of that. So that when I moved over and opened Laundry, they were kind of, like the contacts, I guess, I leaned into a fair bit.
The SB was pretty open format back then. That was like
it was, but but it was like like a lot of the big shows were all pretty hip hop heavy.
Wow, like the Aussie hip hop sort of stuff.
No, it was that period where we're doing Ghostface Killer and Method Man and Redman and like Talib Kweli do a pop up thing on a Wednesday night, which was like I did that whole tour. But we were doing a lot of that kind of stuff.
Well, they did a lot of indie stuff too, because I remember seeing Jamie T there once.
Yeah, we used to do a lot of. I mean, that venue was like, I think I was there for it was the 120th birthday or something. We did like 300 and something bands in a week.
Yeah, crazy.
So over like 4 or 5 stages. So
Are they still doing bands there? No.
They are still using the Gershwin room. Yeah, like it's been through 2 different owners since I was there.
Yeah.
But AVC, who are now operating the venue, are doing some live stuff in the basement bar and in the Gershon room.
Pretty iconic, man. Gershon room was pretty iconic when I was coming up too, like watching, like you said, sort of anything emerging.
Yeah.
Even like nostalgic. It was a iconic room to be able to book. So when you sort of went in there and then with laundry, was it originally open format like a Gershon room and then you moved more into it, or was like, what was your vision when you first sort of started it?
Well, I guess like when I first went into laundry, it was kind of like, I mean, it was just a kind of weird little backpacker bar thing. It was called Revelers. It had originally been called Laundry, and then like I brought the name back. Kind of just, they had some cover bands on here and there and some DJs and stuff, and it wasn't really doing much of anything really.
Yeah.
Like it was just there. And then, kind of went in and just started like, I guess, booking the things that I could book. And a lot of that tended to be, like more hip hop kind of stuff.
Makes sense. Because like, it's interesting because like when you think of clubs or in my circle, because I know we've known each other maybe for 5 odd years now, but my circle is definitely different than yours. And the reason being that you guys were predominantly hip hop and sort of, all that sort of any genre that kind of explodes from that. And when you think of clubs, these days it's dance music. And so that's where I sort of played for such a long time. And for when I think of laundry, I think of it's always had those roots, but for as long as we have been doing what we've been doing. So I've always found it interesting how you did that, like why you did that, because at the time when you bought laundry, everyone wasn't doing that. Everyone was just sort of starting dance clubs basically. Yeah,
pretty much. And I guess I kind of like, I went in there like probably more with the live format of Upstairs in mind. And that started leaning more into hip hop stuff and booking more of that sort of genre, and that worked. And then we just kind of had Downstairs open, and then we were throwing DJs on, and then, we started playing, a lot more kind of hip hop downstairs, just more in a like walk-in bar kind of format sort of thing. And then as that sort of, I guess whether it was luck or smarts or whatever, a lot of the DJs that were booking were playing quite kind of, like I don't know whether modern hip hop is the best description for it, but it was basically like we're playing things like Drake and 21 Savage and all that sort of stuff before anybody else was.
Yeah.
And then it just happened to be kind of, like great timing or divine intervention or whatever, that like as that stuff blew up, and one minute, we're the only club or venue playing any of that sort of music, the next minute, I swear it was like 2 weeks later, you walked into Kmart and they were playing Drake over the loudspeakers out of nowhere. Everyone just flocked there. Like it was just like everyone knew that was the spot that played that kind of music, and then everyone else sort of almost caught up later.
Definitely. Like even for us, we went from dance for a good decade, and then towards the end of my kind of tender, we were playing that too. So it was like till 1 o'clock. It was all that style of stuff, and then went into dance. But I hadn't seen that since I'd started. When I first started going out, it was hip hop into electronic, and the electronic eventually evolved and took over. So it was sort of a full circle moment. It was probably 15 years that it happened. Now I don't know where the current climate of hip hop seems to just dived off a cliff a little bit.
It definitely has dived off a cliff a lot at the moment. I think there's a lot of reasons for that, but I think like probably the biggest reason for it is that like I feel like those hip hop clubs and I can only really properly speak for laundry, I guess, like because I was it's my baby kind of thing, and I was there. It was all very community based, like it kind of like we didn't really do a lot of overt marketing. We had stuff up on social media. Every now and again we'd run like, a smart ass kind of poster campaign or something like that. And it was usually pretty tongue in cheek stuff. It wasn't necessarily like come to the club. It was literally like, something that, it'd be kind of funny, or a take off of something, or, someone had put out a new album and we'd sort of jack the artwork from, this new 21 Savage album or whatever, and like, take 21 Savage off it and put laundry all over it. And, people kind of got what we were talking about. But the majority of people came there because they knew someone else that went there, or, they went to uni with someone or school, or their mates with someone, and then someone was like, if you like this music, come here, or come out with us on the weekend. And then they'd come out, they'd meet other people, and then that would just, it kind of just kept building and building. But that was like, most definitely broken during COVID. You sort of, as, you've been in club world for a long time, you have that thing where people age out at one end, but there's always the 18-year-olds coming in at the other end that are kind of being bought in by their siblings or mates or whatever.
Cousins and
Yeah, but like that stopped.
culture, like club culture.
Yeah.
It's funny because I say the same thing with like, we talk about different genres, but like for us, obviously had a lot to do with the Melbourne sound stuff.
Yeah.
And it's dead. And the reason why people are like, well, why is it dead? I'm like, that 2 year gap is what destroyed it.
100%.
Because it was club music and it was, you couldn't understand it or I guess find it nostalgic unless you'd seen it, like
Yeah.
performed in those spaces,
Yeah.
like those basements. And then now they don't know. The kids don't know. They hear the stories and whatnot
Yeah.
through people talking about it, but they never experienced it. So it's like, they now got to create the new memories to teach the new set of kids. And it's like this sort of like, it's like the tide's gone out. Yeah. Like it's a really weird space. I've not seen anything like it, which I'm sure you're the same.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything like it either. And then I guess the other side of it is, like, we've got, probably a situation with a lot of that stuff, particularly with, I guess, again, I can only speak for most of the hip hop stuff, but, none of us are getting any younger either. And it's sort of, whether the energy is there to do that, I'm looking at, say, laundry at the moment and being like, yeah, look, it could be a lot busier than it is. And, it's not as busy as it was and things like that. But, it's like, yeah, whether you've got the energy to kind of like try and rebuild that
100%.
from scratch either, And then on the other side of that, we've got a whole industry-wide problem at the moment where it's just like, yeah, the spend per head's just not there. So it's just kind of like, even when you've got numbers, and when I'm talking, I'm like going, oh yeah, laundry is like, it's not as busy as it used to be. It's still full.
There's not
There's still points like on a Friday, Saturday night where both levels of the venue are full. We're still selling out shows like on a pretty regular basis and doing like significant numbers through the door within our licensed capacity. Always. But yeah, it's just like, they're just not spending what they were.
Yeah.
Like what would have been, like 350, ticket sales or something on an event, would have kind of extrapolated out into a certain spend per head, that's like less than half of what it was, and it's not, and that's now that, again, that venue's kind of like expanded its, openness with like, the genres and stuff we're doing. Like we've been doing other events with other promoters and other genres, and it's not just like, to start with, I was like, oh, it's just hip hop, and then we did like, the Pride after party with the Barbara guys, and like, did, big numbers across, we joined both venues together for that event, and like, it was exactly the same with that, and there was not a hip hop beat to be heard in either venue over 4 stages of DJs for 6 hours or something.
I've been traveling a lot recently and sort of seeing other clubs and spaces, but it's not even just Melbourne. Like it's like every single state. Even the guys, I was in New Zealand last year around October, and they weren't having that effect yet.
Yeah.
And I was speaking to one yesterday, and he was like, "We've caught the lag, like the same thing
Yeah.
that's happening to you." So
Yeah.
it seems to be a bit of a worldwide problem, which is strange.
It definitely is a worldwide problem. I mean, I was in like Bali like a couple of weeks ago, saw exactly the same thing there. Like, the bigger issue there is it looks like kind of clear fell foresting over there because they've got the space and the money, and it's almost like they've just like forgotten that like Legian Kuta kind of part of Bali existed, and then they've just gone, we'll just move to the next bit and build everything new again. And that's sort of, Canggu and further up than that. But like, there's just no one even in a lot of places like, in those areas. And I mean, that's a tourist destination. Like people are specifically there
To do that.
to party, eat, have like fun and go out.
It's almost like there's not enough people in the world at the moment. Like that's what it feels like.
Yeah.
It's so weird. It's such a strange time and space.
I definitely think people's priorities have changed. And I definitely think, the financial pressure on people's changed. I mean, certainly like it's a long, time between, renting properties or whatever for me, but it's like, you look at what you talk to some of the staff or whatever, and it's like what they're paying in rent a week is maybe what I was paying, albeit, like 20 plus years ago, but, I might have been paying that less than that a month.
Yeah, of course.
Probably closer to the city. When I first moved to Melbourne when I was 17, I was living in Carlton, and talking to people that are living in Coburg and further out now, in the inner north, that are like paying almost double a week what I was paying a month, and again, albeit 20 odd years ago, but it's just, there's a lot more pressure on people financially, and I think there's a lot more, you know, I guess that's like, yeah, it kind of, people are encouraged more and more to like use credit cards and Afterpay and Zip and all these sorts of things now, and they spend a lot of time like working to pay that off rather than kind of just going out and partying.
Well, the other one's the alcohol prices, right? Like they're all rising too. So you've got like people have got less money, access to money.
Yeah.
They've got, it's harder for them to live.
Yeah.
And then you've got alcohol prices rising,
Yeah.
and which we can't turn down because it's inevitable that's kind of going on. And it's like this, not a perfect storm, I'd say it's like a disaster storm sort of thing at the same time. But then at the same time, like you're saying, people still are going out, they're just not spending the same amount of money.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Sorry.
I am seeing people, like, obviously there's still a lot of people out. You know, we're starting to see a lot of like people coming back from overseas, things like that. But yeah, they're just, they aren't spending as much. And yeah, like the costs of running these venues is just like through the roof
Exorbitant.
now. It's just, you know.
So what kind of things are you seeing raised that weren't there, say, a decade ago?
Well, things are probably like mostly there that were there. It's just the cost of them now. You know, it's like public liability insurance and things like that. It's just like, it's probably like 10 times what it was a few years ago, you know, like
just pre-COVID.
Yeah, even pre-COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, you know, we got like a public liability insurance back on Bad Decisions the other day that I was just like, I'm like, that's like $200 a week. Like,
I know people who have,
just insurance.
who have closed their venues or thinking of closing their venues solely off the back of the new insurance hikes.
Yeah.
And then it's like, we just don't know if we can open because how expensive it is.
Yeah.
And then I guess you got APRA, you got PPCA, you've got the security thing that changed just before COVID, where now they're like, it's almost double almost. I think it's like $72 an hour or something they got to get paid. So the costs just keep rising.
Even the liquor licenses, you know, like Bad Decisions, 120 cap venue, you know, not even a big venue. It's like a little terracey thing, you know, on Johnson Street, 2 stories. You know, liquor license about $8,000 a year now. You know, like it's just, yeah, it's like, you know, almost impossible for some places to just, you know, keep going. You know, I really don't know how. Yeah, it's anything that's like smaller than, you know, 100, 150 cap that can't trade later than, you know, like, you know,
1 o'clock.
Yeah, 1 a.m. or something can, you know, almost be making any money, you know.
Yeah.
And they are the ones that, yeah, I think we're starting to see fall first. You know, I mean, there's been about 5 venues, I think, closed in the last 3 months just on Johnson Street. And then, yeah, I went for a walk on Saturday night and grabbed some dinner on Brunswick Street, and, you know, same sort of thing down there, you know. So I think I saw in the 2 blocks I walked 3 bars that had for lease signs on them.
Fingers crossed the government does something and turns that around.
Yeah.
On that, the whole per head spend thing, which we just talked about before.
Yeah.
You're doing different types of hip hop, right? So you're doing like American stuff, nostalgic stuff, Aussie stuff. You're doing the different Aussie genre stuff.
Yeah.
Do you see a massive disparity in spends there? Like, is it like...
Definitely.
Yeah? And
Yeah.
what are they? Can you tell us which ones are like the best, which ones are the worst?
The best spends are the more like gutter rap drill kind of stuff. I think like a big shift in that socioeconomics sort of segment's been that, like, you know, a lot of these people, like a lot of these, you know, people in that, you know, kind of group, I guess, like some of them don't have, like some of them have got what, you know, everyone would have considered once upon a time was a shit job.
Yeah, yeah.
And now they get paid properly for it, you know, which is awesome.
The factory workers.
Yeah, you know, like those jobs, you know, they didn't pay very well for a long time. And now no one wants to do them. And these guys have, you know, stuck it out and they're getting paid quite well for these jobs. And, you know, they don't spend the money on anything, you know, they spend the money on, going out and
Gucci.
like, partying and buying, Gucci and like whatever. But yeah, you know, and I mean, there's obviously probably other factors in, you know, that audience as well. You know, they're up to other things as well that are probably bringing in supplementary incomes. But yeah, it's definitely like, that's definitely a better kind of spending crowd. And then at the other end of it, you know, the Aussie hip hop, I'll probably find, things that are more like, melodic and,
it's like that barbecue rap sort of
stuff.
stuff.
Nicer kind of stuff and, you know, more uplifting kind of lyrical content sort of thing.
It's kind of almost probably rap these days.
Yeah,
hey?
it's probably the lowest spend, you know. Anything that's a bit more kind of, hippie kind of like, you know, they're spending the least.
So that kind of goes me into my next question. So you bridged me perfectly into where I wanted to go with this. So obviously with the gutter rap and whatnot, and I know for myself when I did the same stuff. So sometimes we would be looking at crowds that potentially came with more drama.
Yeah.
Because the spends were good and it made sense for us to do it. So no doubt when you're talking about the gutter and the drill and the Aussie sort of rap style, and the artists I guess we should say are like Cursor. You could probably list off a few that you've done before.
Yeah.
Like 046s.
Yeah, like 046 have played there a couple of times. You know, Enter has done a lot of stuff in there. I think we've had what? Wombat. We've had like about 4 or 5 Husky shows, I think, in the last like 2 years. Yeah, a lot of stuff with like Forte and, you know, some of those.
He's OG.
Kind of OG, yeah.
Even Melbourne, like those guys. They're still the
Melbourne,
same sort of
all
style.
that. And, you know, some of those ones have been, and you've obviously been a part of some of those events, have been, really good examples, I think, of, you know, and I don't know if this was where the question was leading, but it was just like, I think the way we've been able to like manage these events and deal with security and deal with the audience, in that some of those events are really good examples of they've done them somewhere else and it's turned into an unmitigated disaster or people have got hurt. And then, you know, we've potentially done the same gig in some cases within, say, 7 days and run a sold-out event with no issues whatsoever. Everyone's come, respected the venue, respected the staff because we've respected them.
Yep.
You know, and I've, you know, always say when I'm like briefing security and staff, you know, it's just like treat everyone like a human being and with respect unless they prove otherwise, you know.
For sure. Because you saved my ass on one, which is the one I reckon you're talking about.
Yeah.
So I had a show and we did it. I won't name the venue, but it was understaffed.
Yeah.
It had 3 guards and there was probably about 250 big heads in there.
Yeah.
Broke into a brawl. Could have been handled pretty quickly. Wasn't because they couldn't contain it.
Yeah.
Went on for like 45 minutes. It was my show. I felt like Suge Knight as I was walking out of there. The police were everywhere. People getting pepper sprayed. But it was legitimately, and I know we talked about this, but I blame the security for what happened. Like it could have easily been mitigated. We went to you and did an event, I think it was 2 weeks later, and we did similar numbers, not one drama, not one issue. So, and I remember talking to you about that then, and I'd love to kind of go through it again, but I was like, well, how? Like, how are you able to do this when most venues can't? Like, I did a lot of that stuff when I had my Club Empire. We were doing like Hooligan House, Young and Lives, all those sort of guys, one for the lot. And we also never really had issues. Only once we did. But a guy pulled out a gun, unfortunately, which I think I told you about. But second to that, you got the No Orders had more of that style of stuff than you have, and you've probably had the least amount of, not trouble to say, but you've definitely mitigated the best, in my opinion.
I think we've like, mitigated any issues. We've like nipped anything in the bud really quickly. I think, look, you know, I've been working with this kind of, I guess, music and stuff like that for such a long time now. I've kind of like, worked out what I think is kind of going to be like, you know, high risk or not. And we kind of put things in place for it. But, you know, I think a lot of it and a lot of the success of that venue over time, you know, just generally has been like, I've kind of worked with this philosophy of sort of running everything from the front door, you know, and that's been something that I've done prior to even, you know, like opening Laundry. And that being there, talking to customers, you know, like, and just kind of like, getting on a level with everybody, you know, like from when they get there. You know, and then like when they leave, we thank everyone and things like that. You know, and you just set a tone, and then it's kind of, you know, can almost like be like, you know, walk straight up to someone if something is kind of like heating up a little bit inside, and be like, bro, like we let you in. We're doing these things. You know, we're doing these shows no one else wants to do. Like, don't mess up here. You know, like because it just
ruins it for everyone.
It ruins it for everybody. You know, and like, you know, we try and be flexible with things. You know, we try and like, you know, if someone rocks up and they're smashed, it's just like, dude, go get a kebab, come back in half an hour, we'll see what we can do, you know? Like, and we'll have, you know, and there's other things where, we go out of our way with things. You know, I had a guy at a gig that like, we, you know, most of these shows, you know, obviously we run scan tech on the front door, you know, any of these things are high risk, we run metal detectors, things like that. One night, a guy managed to get through with a box cutter. I don't know, he probably had it between his ass cheeks or something, but you know, like he managed to get in there, like got into a bit of a scuffle with a dude. The guy ended up with a bit of a cut across his face. It wasn't like the most heinous thing I've ever seen. I've probably seen worse done with a fist out the front. But the guy was like going berserk that had been cut, you know, and then security were trying to deal with him. I ended up talking to him. Within a couple of minutes, I'd got him back in a much better place. We did some first aid on him and then let him stay outside and cool down. He was there for the headline act. He'd specifically gone with he was a bit of an older bloke, he'd gone with his stepson to specifically see this act who was from Perth, and he was just, that was all he was focused on in the end, you know, and it was just like, bro, all right.
So you patched him up and you watched
We patched him up and I took him through downstairs, through the green room, backstage upstairs, and I stood with him at the side of the stage. My security were like, oh, we don't want him back inside. And I'm just like, well, I'm taking him back in and I'll stand beside a stage and watch the show with him. He stood there, watched about 15 minutes of it. That was enough for him. And then he walked him back out. His wife picked him up or whatever out the front and off he went. And
Happy days.
Yeah, I was just like, you probably want to go by emergency on the way home and just make sure you know, the little butterfly Band-Aids are enough and you don't need stitches, you know. But yeah, like sometimes that's all it takes. You know, we did 3 sold out shows with complete, I think it was maybe started last year or the year before. You know, a kid turned up to the first one just like, he could barely stand up. He was like sideways and he was just like ready to go the guards. And I was just like, dude, I'm like, you're not going to get in tonight. Like, you're hammered. I'm like, have you got a ticket for tomorrow night? And he was like, no, I've just got a ticket for tonight. And I'm like, look, if you go home, sober up, turn up tomorrow night, and you're in better form than tonight, I'll just put you on the door list.
Yeah.
You know, and you still get to see the show, but you're not, you know.
Not tonight.
Not tonight, you know, and you firing up at everyone's just slowing everyone else down getting in and all of that. And, you know, that happened, you know. He was like, took it, got on a tram, whatever, went home, came back the night after, walked straight up to me, shook his hand, introduced himself, in he went, you know. Had a great night and then ended up buying another ticket for the 3rd show. And
it's crazy
coming
how
back again.
it's humility is the word, I believe, but it's like, I would say the same. It's like if you talk to people like they're people and you actually have discussions with them, most times, 9 times out of 10, it does de-escalate. Yeah. And as a venue owner too, like you got to, so some people fuck up, like that's a reality. Yeah. We'd have people get into fights and whatnot and you just sort of say, I remember having a situation again with a couple of big lads, like older lads. I let them into one of my shows. They biffed on with the guards and then they went outside and they were sort of playing up as they do. Yeah. And I just said, boys, I'll let you in here. This is on me. You've made this mistake. And it actually wasn't their fault. The guards overreacted. It was like one of them was smoking a joint. Yeah. And he put it out and whatever. Because guards, sometimes they do. Like that's what they do, right? Yeah. And I sort of said the same thing and I was like, you know, I've invited you down. If you play up on this door now, you're only making it hard for me, like no one else. And they walked off. They were completely fine. But it was escalating so rapidly. Yeah. And it was just like having a quick conversation with somebody and just sort of putting it into perspective that I'm here to help you. I'm not actually your enemy. Yeah. It just changes it so much.
It can, yeah. And I mean, the other thing with guards is a lot of the time too that, you know, like if you haven't done what we've been doing for so long too, like most people forget that like a lot of these guards are kids, essentially, you know, like the amount of times I've had a guard turn around and go, oh, I'm not in on Saturday. And I'm like, oh, how come? Like you're here every week on the door. He's just like, oh, it's my 21st. And I'm like, what? Like there's like this like mental assumption that because like someone's in that sort of authority position that it's like your brain assumes that they're older or more mature. Yeah, I get you, and they turn out to be like 19, 20. Most of them it's like at minimum it's job number 2, if not job number 3. You know, I've got plenty of guys that are like solid guards that, you know, work regularly with me. But, you know, like some of them might have been, you know, like, in a warehouse all day since 6 a.m. and then they're still on my door at 3 a.m. the next day. And, you know, you wonder why they get irritable sometimes. But, you know, they're trying to save up to buy a house or they're trying to save up to get married or like, you know, go on a big holiday or whatever.
And they don't want the drama either when they're on the door.
They don't, right? But sometimes, you know, they get a bit short with people or they, you know, like they get a bit oblivious to things or something, you know, and then in some cases, they do kind of get a bit cocky and...
Have ego.
Yeah, have ego and they feel that like a sense of ownership or, you know, protection within the venue because they work there regularly and if you don't have a lot of issues a lot of the time. You know, I had to turn around to one the other week on a pretty, you know, high-risk gig and just be like, dude, stop yelling at people.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like, A, I don't want you yelling at my customers. And B, like I can guarantee basically what's gone through the front door, but I cannot guarantee that, you know, an artist hasn't been having a smoke out the back or something, like, and opened the back door of the venue next to the green room and someone hasn't slipped in or
Yeah, of
whatever.
course.
And you yell at the wrong dude that's just like, you know, on another planet at that point.
Have you seen those sort of situations? Like, I know you're dealing with these high risk guys. And
Yeah.
it's going to lead into another question too, but have you
Yeah.
seen these sort of, what are some of like the badder things you've seen when you've dealt with these high risk artists?
I don't know. It's just like, I guess it's one of those things, like it's, you know, a lot of stuff like happens, I guess, around the venue.
They love a good graft, don't they?
Yeah, they do love that. But it's so funny, like that stuff. It's like, and it's something I've seen change over time too. Like when we first started out and we're doing a lot of Aussie hip hop and, you know, like particularly, I guess, like the more iconic kind of Aussie hip hop artists that are now, you know, like those ones that are sort of retired or you know, have moved into management and things like that. There was a really like high level of respect for the venue and they really didn't do a lot of that stuff. Then we went through a period, particularly post-COVID, where it was like, yeah, kids were coming out and no one knew that. It was like no one knew the rules or the ethics or whatever of the venues, and not to, you know, like, mate, tag Coles all you want, you know, like, but
Go
like,
take a train.
Yeah, but don't tag a venue that, like, you know, the owner's standing on the door of, and it's probably like, and I had this, like, it was the first time in ages actually the other week where I'd kind of like lost my shit at somebody, and it was some young kid out the front of laundry. It was a gig that wasn't that busy, and this kid's like drawing all over the walls in the bathrooms, and I'm like, mate, like, I've been in the office all day trying to like book stuff.
Yeah.
This gig's not even that busy. I'm like, who do you think's going to be scrubbing the walls in the toilet at 4 a.m? Because it's like some caustic chemical that I don't really trust my staff with. Because like, I'm like, you know, next thing I'll have a work cover claim because someone's breathed in too much, you know, whatever it is that gets graffiti off walls. And I'm in a confined space that's soundproof, that's like bathrooms and, you know, got no ventilation, and I'm spraying crap all over the wall. You know, and I like lost it at this kid, and he was just like, "Oh, I didn't even think of it like that," you know. And it's just like,
I didn't even think that I shouldn't write it on the walls.
But yeah, look, I mean, yeah, we see all sorts of stuff. We see people that are, you know, drug affected. We see people trying to like, bring sharp things into the venue at times, which we catch on the door.
Because the drugs you would deal with would be different. Like the ones we dealt with were like sort of ketamine, cocaine, GHB. Ecstasy.
Yeah.
I'm guessing with you guys there's a lot of weed, Zanax, like down and all sort of stuff.
Yeah, a lot of benzos, weed. You know, the odd person that's like probably like been on the pipe in the.
Of course, we do that too. Yeah,
as well. And yeah, still a bit of like MD and stuff like that with the hip hop stuff. You know, okay. Now that we're doing more, you know, electronic stuff as well. Yeah, we're having to deal with all the other side of things as well.
Issues. Yeah.
But yeah, like it was, the hip hop stuff was, like more downery kind of stuff. You know, we used to have the biggest problems we used to have was people, like greening out and stuff. You know, they'd done the drink.
I've been at your venue with a friend who greened out.
Yeah, it's like they're getting the drinking and the smoking around the wrong order, and next thing they're just like.
Well, he messaged me saying, "Hey, I'm about." He didn't even get in, so he messaged me saying, "Hey, I'm heading in," and then like an hour later, I'm like, "Are you okay?" And he's like, "I'm at home, man. I agreed out." And I was like, "Sweet, okay."
Yeah.
He preloaded beforehand.
Yeah, and we get a few with like they've taken MD and things like that. Especially again more with the newer stuff like the husky kind of crowd and stuff like that, which is this like
they're on MD. Those kids.
Some of them are,
Weird.
Yeah.
So when you were dealing with the Zanax, like I've only sometimes dealt with it very small. But when I say Zanax, I mean downers or benzos. Yeah. Some of the stuff those people do are pretty wild. Like, how is that when you're in the peak of? Because I know like a lot of the Melbourne hip hop, especially like their iconic stuff, and I know exactly what I'm talking about. I talk about it. Those guys were heavily involved in that. Was that hard to deal with? Because I know when they push over that edge, it's worse than ice almost sometimes.
Yeah, look, most of our experience with that has more been that they just drop.
They fall asleep.
Yeah, they just drop. You know, they'll be at the bar or something, and they're trying to order a drink, and then next thing they're on the floor.
Yeah, we had ones where they just black out, didn't know what they were doing.
Yeah.
So I guess the next question, we've gone a complete tangent off my list what I was talking about, but that's what we do, right?
Yeah.
But when you're doing these high-risk artists like, I guess, Husky, even Forte, for example,
Enter and all that
Enter,
sort of
all
stuff,
these
yeah.
guys, right?
Yeah.
In Sydney, anyone who sees this sort of stuff, they know that they can't play in over there. And Sydney's really cracking down on all those sort of hip hop artists.
Yeah.
All those hip hop artists that are getting cracked down on in Sydney, you do.
Yes.
Do you have problems with the police in Melbourne, or is they and they're not across it? They don't care. Like Melbourne seems to be a bit of a free space for these guys, and even the stuff that I did, we were able to do it. But in Sydney, the same shows that I was doing were getting shut down.
I find it's a combination. Of they don't seem to be across some of it. I just definitely have had some shows where I've had some, almost amusing conversations where it's kind of like, they're ringing you up about the dude that's the opening act because like he was allegedly involved in something, 3 blocks away 12 months ago and it's about to go to court. And I'm like, well, he's the opening act. He's on at 9 o'clock. We'll just make sure he's out of the venue at 9:30. And perhaps on the same lineup, not even ask about the headliner who I may well have spent 2 weeks negotiating with a parole officer in New South Wales to get to be able to cross the border into Victoria to even be able to do the show.
Yeah.
And that particular gig, like the headliner had just done 10 years, So, we get that. And then, sometimes we get, like a bit of an overreaction on things as well. I remember distinctly doing one drill rap gig on a Thursday night. There was a whole bunch of kids from, and look, whether it's an overreaction or whatever, it seemed to be at the time. And then the result of the gig kind of, it seemed like it. I think the gig probably pulled anywhere from 50 to 80 people. There was more than 50 to 80 police in attendance. Critical incident response team shut down the back laneway behind the venue so no one had rear access to the venue. They had mounted police on horses marching up and down the street, and they pretty much closed the street off for the gig that was, a whole bunch of 18, 19-year-old kids on a Thursday night based on intelligence from the internet that, one postcode gang was going to attack another postcode gang at the gig or something, which, didn't seem particularly realistic to us. They wanted us to cancel the gig. Like, I basically said to them that they were welcome to have as much presence as they liked, would work in with them as much as they liked. But, at this point, I didn't really see that there was a need to not run the event.
Yeah.
And that, again, these kids were trying to,
do something better.
Perform, do something better, create art, essentially, and not have to be again a continual part of that cycle, which is something I'm seeing a lot with these artists, even, the ones that are starting to do well now. It's just like, when you talk to most of them, it's like they don't want to go back to jail. They don't want to deal with that crap. They're like, well, if I can come and do a sold out show in Melbourne and walk out with, 10 grand in my back pocket or more in some cases, that's a way better hustle than slinging bags.
It's like they force them to do it though. It's like that's so wild, especially New South Wales. But it's like, hey, you can't make legitimate money. Yeah. But what do they expect them to fall into? It's like it's such a crazy thought process from the New South Wales police, especially.
Victorian police have done the same thing plenty of times as well. I mean, the Victorian police have certainly done the same thing around the bikies and stuff like that.
But then sometimes too, this you and I both know, I've done stuff where there's guys that are affiliated and they don't even seem to know. So it's hit or miss really.
It is pretty hit and miss, but when they seem to get someone in their target range, I guess I have seen, some people that were in that world, probably had done the odd bad thing or whatever, and in some instances been arrested and charged and whatever for that, but were running legitimate, serious businesses that employed in some cases large amounts of people.
Yeah.
And next thing their permit to do this was revoked, and then their license to do that was revoked, and then, essentially were pushed into a point where, they had to wind their business up and, weren't able to do any of that stuff anymore. And then, what else are they going to do?
Have you ever had one where the cops have said you can't do it?
I think we've had one yet where they've told us that we, absolutely can't do it.
Have they given you, I've seen another venue, I won't mention the one, but they were basically told, hey, there's an issue that's coming up that you guys are aware of. We're going to push on this a lot harder if you do X show. Have you had issues like that before?
I haven't quite got to that point, and I guess, again, through good management and relationships over the almost 13 years that like we've had Laundry. We haven't perhaps put ourselves in a position which some other venues may have for whatever reason, and it may not be the venue's fault, it's just circumstances. And certainly, like I'm pretty sure I know which venue you're talking about, like the location of that venue, you know, probably lends them to having a lot more scrutiny and stuff at times as well. Funnily enough, you know, being down a side street essentially in Fitzroy at times has got its benefits, which is probably, you know, where we don't really have a lot of issues and we have a fairly destination kind of crowd that don't tend to interact much with anybody else. And they come, they do their thing, they go out and then they get back in cars and whatever, and then they leave the area. So yeah, we're not in a situation where sometimes, like the crowds are mixing with other crowds that perhaps don't get along or just get it. You know, I mean, I say to security 80% of the time with these gigs, I'm just like, you won't have any issue with like all of this kind of crew that's going to come to it, because like they know the rules of the venue and they know how we are and how people need to behave here. It'll be like some kid that just saw, you know, an interview on another podcast or something, you know, like with that guy and was like, oh, that seems cool. Like I'm going to buy a ticket online and turn up and not get the culture, you know, like, but that's universal. I mean, that's, you know, I was in some bars in Bali the other week that, you know, with some locals and things that, you know, I think if I had just walked into myself down a side street, probably would have, been an issue, you know, like, but then, you know, because I was with a whole bunch of like local crew and stuff like that, it wasn't, you know.
It's a cool thing, like being involved in that Oz hip hop stuff myself too, was like what you're talking about, because obviously everyone was aware of the cop pressure. Yeah. And we would have like rev ups, because I was obviously running the shows, I wasn't running the venues, but we would have like powwows before where it was like, guys, you know, this is sold out show, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, this is where we're trying to go. If everyone's going to look out for each other. So it's not just the guards here. If someone you know is fucking up, you pull them aside, because we can't do this stuff if this stuff happens. And I did fucking 40 shows, and I've had 2 with incidents, one in New Zealand, one in Melbourne. But other than that, majority have gone completely without any form of issue. And the reason being is that these kids in these communities, they want to see it happen. Yeah. And I remember having a conversation with the cops years ago about our venue, Empire. Yeah. And he was like, when it was sharp before we took over it, the crime rate in the streets got worse because they had nowhere to go and nowhere to do. Yeah. So sometimes when you look at these venues, it's like with what you guys are doing, it's like it needs to be there, because these kids need this community to go. So that's one night where they're not wandering around, they're not loitering, they're not doing whatever. They're getting a sense of community, they're meeting new people. Yeah. They're doing all this sort of stuff, or they're getting to see aspirational things or hear about aspirational things in a sense, where everyone's looking at it like a negative light, but what they don't think about is all the positive stuff that comes from it, right? Yeah. Well,
that's the thing, you know, and you get like, even that mix of people that are at those events, you know, it can be, you know, just thinking of those, like those Band from New South Wales shows we did the other week, like
there Good title for an event name.
Yeah, totally. But like, you know, the thing like was, like I know, like I personally know a lot of that crowd there, and there are a lot of guys in there that were involved in, you know, bikie clubs or, you know, all sorts of other stuff that are out the other side of that now and things like that, but they don't really go out, you know, they're not going to talk to people, but, you know, you get a couple of G-ups in them at the bar or whatever, and like they are having a yarn to someone in the smokers area, and, you know, some 18-year-old kid might be like, oh yeah, I was thinking about hanging around with these dudes or whatever, and they like will say to them like, don't do it. You know, it's a mugs game, like, you know, it's just you do it, you think it's fun, and nothing good comes out of it, you know, like, and that might, you know, that little conversation in the smokers area at a show with a bloke that doesn't go out much, you know, like might, essentially save someone's life, you know, at one end or the other, or changes someone's trajectory of what they're doing, you know.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, like, that's what we're lucky we get to see that. But sometimes when people look in, they're like, you know, this is a bad idea, putting all these people together. And for someone that's done it like you, I'm the same. I'm like, no, it's not. It's actually the opposite. Yeah. It's the most productive and best thing. More of this shit is the answer to less crime, opposed to less of it. It equals the other way around. But I guess it's a hard one for people to understand. Yeah. Yeah. With the hip hop stuff, you work in the hip hop stuff. Yeah. Obviously, when it comes to rappers, they're arguably some of the most unreliable genre of people that roll up. Yeah. Have you had issues with like booking artists and not turning up? Have you had artists or not playing on time? Have you been relatively lucky with it? But I guess when you look at like festival lineups, almost every single time there's an artist that's a hip hop artist that drops off.
Yeah.
You've dealt with them for so long. Like, how's that been for you?
Look, it hasn't been too bad. I think the level of artists that we have kind of worked with, and the amount of time that I kind of was in the industry, I guess, and like working even, you know, like in between SB and Laundry, you know, I was working as a tour manager. I was touring a lot of artists and stuff as well. Yeah, we didn't really have a lot of issues. Like, you know, we've had a few issues with, like, you know, artists probably nerves getting the better of them, or
Too pissed.
Yeah, intoxication sort of different things, you know, getting the better of them. But, you know, I've also seen some of those artists that's happened with, you know, again, come out the other end of that now and, you know, be putting on stellar performances, you know, like 10 years after the fact of, you know, remembering a gig where, like, you know, the microphone stand was holding them up on stage kind of thing. So, but yeah, like it's, we haven't really had a lot of issues. We've had some amusing things happen, but, you know, not in a bad way, just, you know, the way some people choose to get on stage or off stage or things like that. You know, we had Action Bronson play there one night and he just sort of disappeared off the stage into the crowd and walked straight through the crowd, handed his microphone to a security guard on the front door and got in a limousine out the front. Like
During the gig?
As the gig was kind of like,
What?
in his mind, the gig was done. So, which was fine, you know, he played a set, but that was his like exit strategy of the event. You know, he just sort of like, jumped off stage into the crowd and was rapping and had people around him, and then just kind of like walked through the crowd and handed his mic to the guard at the front door.
You'd see some wild shit, right? Because you've done a lot of like after parties for events, or you've done artists that have blown up, like Action Bronson, for example.
Yep.
Can you tell me some of those stories, some of those people you've worked with?
Yeah.
I know you got a plethora of them.
Yeah, look, one of the early ones was this random Childish Gambino thing. Like he just was, I think he was on Big Day Out and he would have been Hi-Fi at the time, which is now Max Watts. He had a sold out show there. And the guy that was tour managing him just, randomly messaged me or called me and was just like, and I think back then it was probably more call because the text message was probably 50 cents back then. Like called me up and he's just like, oh, what have you guys got on tonight? And I was like, oh, we do this little drum and bass thing on a Wednesday night or whatever. And he was like, oh, look, you know, Childish Gambino wants to do a DJ set. And I was just like, okay, like I'm kind of like, the name's familiar, but you know, like whatever. I'm like, let's just do it. And then we did it. It went up on, of all things back then, again, Reddit at the time, and it went viral on Reddit. And we had like 700 people turn up for this thing. Like we had to fight our way to get him to the stage, like to get him on.
And like one of the things I say with you is you're like, every time somebody is here, you're a hardcore hustler. Like you're trying to get them. So is that event what made you be like that? Like I know if there's an opportunity for something like that to happen, I feel like you're one of the guys that can make it happen. Yeah. Or those random things that may look random aren't that random. They're very like calculated by you. Is that one of the things that kind of made you start thinking that way?
Look, I think my time at the SB probably did more of that. You know, we did a lot of like, you know,
pop-up stuff,
pop-up random shows on a Wednesday night or something, you know, where someone had done a bigger show or had a sold out show even within the venue, and then we're doing that. But like a lot of it, like weirdly enough, like, a lot of it wasn't that calculated. I think a lot of it was just that like, and it's the same theme all the way through, that we would just chill with everything, you know? And like some of these artists had seen that, and, you know, we'd done, Freddie Gibbs is a good example of that, where it kind of like was, you know, he'd done 2 sold out shows there, previous tours, then I think moved up to the corner, and then after the show was hanging out with people and everyone was just like, oh, let's just go to Laundry, you know, and then they just turn up to Laundry, you know. I think, was it something Skepta, I think was another one that did the same thing. Like we didn't even know. Yeah, I had, recently we had, I forget the guy's name now, but he's like Kendrick Lamar's cousin.
Not sure. No.
But he was on that same Kendrick tour. They just like booked a booth online.
Yeah.
Like and turned up and like, were just, I think it's Baby Keem maybe.
Oh yeah, Baby Keem. Yeah. Baby Keem.
Yeah, it's like rocked up. There's like, oh, we've got a booth booked. And then like people are like, that's like Baby Keem. He's like the main supporter on the Kendrick tour. And then like, I think one of my managers started chatting to him, and next thing, we all had a bunch of tickets to Kendrick. Like,
oh really? That's awesome.
But yeah, they just like booked a booked a booth online, you know, just wanted to come down and like, you know, vibe. So
Do you have like a favorite show that you've done at your venue? I know it's a hard question, been there
it
for
is a
13
hard
years.
question.
Maybe even a couple.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, it's a hard question. Because so much of that, you know, it's just like, you know this as well. It's just like the stuff that's in that your recent memory, like that was so cool,
Yeah,
you
of
know,
course.
like,
yeah.
But then, you know, in hindsight of everything that we've done, you know, look, I think some of it, like, you know, doing Ghostface Killer there was nuts, you know, and it wasn't even sold out, you know.
Someone
it was
you
like,
grew up listening to.
but it was like someone you grew up listening to, and you were just like, you know, this is crazy, you
Yeah.
know, like. So yeah, like that's probably up there. Action Bronson was nuts, but again, you know, back in those days, like, you know, and I'm still very hands-on. I'm still at the venue most nights it's open, things like that. But it's like back then I was literally probably banging change in the tills as well, and like, you know, all that sort of stuff. And like I probably didn't really get to see much of it, but it was nuts to have done it at the time, and just the energy and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, look, recently I've been really enjoying doing a lot of these, like, you know, yeah, the gutter rap kind of stuff. You know, we've done a whole bunch of shows with, yeah, like Enter and Husky and all that sort of stuff, and 046 and, you know, Melbourne. Posse Shot, you know, done a couple of shows with them. You know, some of them have been crazy.
I've heard that. Like everyone says that they're like unbelievable to watch.
They are. Look, they're unbelievable to watch. And then, yeah, like there's just, like, it's just a different energy. We actually had a show with them where it was one of their first headlines, I think. Like, it was certainly the first headline they did at Laundry, and we ended up with like, if that was one show we did have an incident on, and it was, albeit not our problem or fault as such, but it was just like, yeah, this girl got knocked back that was like off her head. Somewhere along the lines, police got called, and then came down to deal with her, and then like. She ended up subsequently kicking this female police officer in the face. So they then called for more backup. And as more police arrived to deal with this girl, the gig finished. So we essentially had like 300, like, you know,
Riders.
Eshe, like lads kind of piling out of the venue as police have got like 4 cops are holding this girl.
And they love each other, those two groups.
Exactly. Like there's like 4 coppers like holding this girl and pinning this girl to the ground as like 300 kids come out of the gig. And that, like, yeah, it looked like it was going to turn to shit for a minute. Like it literally, we ended up with Muscles and Carney from Posse Shot, my whole team. I think one of my, like my booker, my main booker at the time was at the show as well. And were just like almost going like group to group, person to person, being like, guys, just like move on. Like we've got to go, like just chill. Like, don't fuck this up, you know, like, and people did start to just sort of break up and dissipate, like, and then the pivotal moment was, I guess by that point, the police had obviously probably identified this girl by then anyway. So like, thankfully someone in their organisation and the group there at the time made the you know, decision to basically just let her go.
Yeah. So
they just let her up and she bolted, and the what crowd was there cheered, and then like everyone just kind of dispersed. But yeah, you know, that was, yeah, that would probably actually be, to be honest, that was probably the one time where they tried to get me to like shut the venue down, and I was just like, I was just like, I'm like, the show's finished that this crowd's come from. They're all out of the venue anyway. The club room downstairs is full of people. They've got nothing to do with this crowd. Like, why am I shutting the venue down? It doesn't make any sense. Secondly, it makes even less sense to put even more people out on the street
to cause you more drama.
And cause more drama.
Yeah.
You know, so like, let's just keep this room running. You can take you in, show you where these guys performed. You know, you can see the room's empty, and we can just work on dispersing this crowd together.
That's why sometimes I wish they worked better with us, because like those exact situations where you're like, this is not going to work.
No.
Sometimes they come to the party eventually, but it's like, we know, we deal with these things. I can tell you the outcome now.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing we've done. Like, we've gone through, like, you know, anywhere from 2 to 8 processes essentially with like a punter or a group of punters before we've even involved the police. Like, you know, that's often our last resort. It's certainly not our first resort. You know, you're certainly not going to be like, oh, we kick someone out that's a bit drunk or a bit like, you know, like arced up or whatever. Like you're not going to like be like, oh, you kicked out, mate, and call triple O.
Yeah,
like,
yeah. Imagine if everyone did.
Exactly. Like it just would be a giant waste of resources. We're going to like try and talk him down. We're going to try and move him on. We're going to like try 5 different ways to do that. You're going to start out nice and you're going to move through to like mean or like kind of physically moving them up the street. Before it gets to the point where you're like, okay, cool. This is at the point where like potentially one of my staff's going to get hurt or the patron's going to get hurt. So we're going to like call somebody else to, for intervention.
And I reckon we did it maybe a couple times. Like it wasn't something that we did often. It was like full last resort.
Yeah.
The last thing I was going to say before we wrap this up is sort of there's a misconception, I would say, when you're running clubs that it's all glorious, right? So like, and there's times that are glorious, there's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
But it comes with ups and downs. And like anyone who doesn't know, they just see the ups because we don't really promote the downs as club people or entertainment people. So for you, like what are some of the ups and downs that you've sort of battled, I guess, working in the industry for so long that people probably wouldn't know about?
Yeah, I guess like it's just, that's super true. I mean, obviously like, essentially we're in a marketing promotions business, and laundry's probably, a unique venue as such. Empire was probably the same when you were there where like you're the promoter and the operator. Yeah. And that's not very common.
Not these days, it was though.
No, it used to be more, but it's definitely not very common now. Most venues are just like, we're the venue and like, we're here to like, and I literally saw this in a chat or something the other day, where it was someone was just like, we're the bookers, we're the venue, like they're trying to turn us into the promoters and stuff like that. Like that's not our skill set, but like I think, that certainly has and was been my skill set, was your skill set, and is your skill set, you're still doing events and stuff. People don't see, that side of it when, you do have a bad start to the night or you just have a bad night, even working with external stuff, I found even more, like you're so reliant on like what somebody else tells you. And, a lot of that can't, it can't be tested or quantified sometimes, like we can genuinely see, more and more now with things like Spotify and stuff like that and streaming, like you can look at someone and be like, on paper, this looks like it's going to like be a killer gig. But in reality, it's not, And
it's weird from when you're old school like us. Like I talked about this, don't even know where the other day, but I'm like, we were used to look at those things and go, yeah, cool, they're going to sell tickets. But there's guys out there doing billions of streams. You can't sell 10 tickets.
100%.
Which is something that never existed. Like if you were getting that sort of traction online or anywhere, you could sell, you'd sell out places.
100%.
So this is the new world, like post-COVID.
And we're seeing the opposite as well. I'm seeing people that are like,
Posse Shot example.
Posse Shot.
Melbourne's another one.
Melbourne, Enter, all these like even, 046, that sort of stuff. Like they're really like in context, like they don't really have that many like followers on Instagram. They don't have like, some of these guys like Enter and stuff like that, like they get their Instagram hacked all the time, things like that, and then they're starting again from scratch. Like
they're still selling out shows.
And they're still selling out shows.
Yeah, it's wild, hey.
And they're selling heaps of merch and like all sorts of stuff. Like, they're like they're banking like on that. But yeah, look, people don't see that other side of it. And I think people just don't see the finance side of it. They don't see that like
the stresses
of like the rent and the costs and all that sort of stuff. And again, like I think we also, like
bad, like if you do a bad run of shows that you booked, which are bad decisions, which is kind of funny because you're basketball, and then you've got to pay the rent still. It's like, how many times have you gone through that? Like, I know I did too. And you're like, fuck. And then the next month it's the opposite. And you have a killer. So it's like this up, down, up, down. It's like, it's this constant battle. And like, I know I've stepped out now, I'm doing bits and pieces, but people regularly asking me like, oh, how's working in the alcohol industry? And I'm like, it's like a sunny holiday. Like working in events, every single Monday I had to reinvent the wheel effectively.
100%. And that's certainly the thing with like, and that's the pressure that people don't get with like, if you're trying to do things on a weekly as well. And then, like we're still on average running like 7 events a week across the 2 venues,
That's insane.
And like, it's just, like it's a lot, and it's like the stress that comes through it. And then like, it's the other thing that people don't see as well, I guess, is like everything takes time. So like, we'll run an event on a Friday night or a Saturday night, identify something's not working or it hasn't hit the targets that it was supposed to. But, it could take that change that you think you need to make to try and get it back on track. It's not like you go in again Monday and like make that change and it's got an immediate effect. It might take 3-4 weeks or a month or something like that for
Sometimes
it to kind of
doesn't work.
Yeah, filter out, and then sometimes it still doesn't work and you've got to move on to the next idea. Or something will work once or it'll work 1 week and then, like laundry, we did like 1 million of these like tribute events with these big Drake parties and stuff like that were bringing in 1,000 payers and things like that over the course. We turned the room over like 2-3 times in a night. I could run a Drake party next weekend, no one would come.
Yeah.
But then another promoter that's like managed to like probably stay more on top of things and really nail their like meta advertising platform and stuff will run the same event in my opinion, not even as cool of a way as we used to do it or whatever, and fill a room.
Yeah, of course.
Like we're seeing that as well. But yeah, look, I think the biggest thing is that, people just don't see the like costs of things. They're like, my
drink's expensive.
Yeah, I can go buy like a, case of Corona for $60 or whatever. Like, how come you're charging $12 for a Corona? And it's just like, well, I've got to charge $12 for a Corona because, I've got to pay someone $30 or $5 an hour to serve it to you. Somebody else $32 an hour to like pick it up from the table that you left it on.
$80 to keep you safe.
$80 to keep you safe because like,
artists.
one of your mates decides that, he's going to crack someone in the head with the Corona because he doesn't like the look of him. And then $500 in the middle of the night to get an emergency plumber out because your third mate thought it'd be funny to smash his bottle down the toilet.
Yeah, exactly.
Plus, the only reason you came there in the first place is because we've got, the better end of the hip-hop DJs in Melbourne playing and, there's a door girl to take your money at
Sound
the thing and there's
lighting.
someone's running around, like taking your photos and then you've got, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of sound systems and lighting and all that sort of stuff, which, continually needs to be maintained and upgraded and all that sort of stuff. And all of that stuff is like, it's not even like a one-off thing, like my production manager, I swears every week's just like, this computer needs more RAM or like whatever. Cause like, someone's like bought in a bigger file and we're trying to run it on a, LED wall or whatever. And the computer can't keep up, and I'm just like, man, that computer's new, but it's like, turns out it was 7 years old or it's 6 years old or whatever. And then it's just like, well, now it needs a new fan and it needs this and it needs that, and it's really boring shit.
And you got to keep up with the Joneses too. So someone changes their pixelation on their screen, so you got to change your pixelation.
100%,
someone does lasers, so you got to do lasers.
Yeah,
someone changes from smoke machine to hazers.
And then you get funny things. As we've opened the genres up more as well, where you've got like certain promoters wanting something specific, and you're just like, you stand out the front having a heated discussion with a drum and bass promoter that's complaining that the top boxes, fire a meter over the top of the bass bins, and it's just like, well, you might not like that for drum and bass, but the other like 99% of shows that we do here, like that's the setup that we need, and I could rip that out and put, rip the function one system out and put a void system in and like flatline the whole thing, and it'd sound great for drum and bass, but it'd be terrible for everything else that we do. So like it's just a lot of those things that people just don't necessarily get. And then and then the other thing I think there's just it's just a general upkeep costs of doing everything. And then if you are an operator or an owner or that like wants to try and gets fickle or finicky about like kind of providing the best experience to people, and we're constantly trying to upgrade stuff and keep things clean and like all of that, and then sometimes you're competing with venues that just aren't, and it just seems like sometimes like you're trying to do that and provide the best experience for people and the safest experience for people, and then there's other places that aren't and really don't give a shit about their crowd, but they might have more crowd.
Exactly.
Because maybe they've got a better promoter team in there, or they've got the DJ that's hot at the moment, or they've managed to like kind of rebuild a community around things. But I think that's definitely the challenge at the moment. It's just like I'm seeing it's more it's like the iconic what we would have said were the iconic venues, and we've seen some of them go even in the last few months. And I think there'll be more to go because maybe we haven't kept up as much as we could have, or
Yeah.
you know, been as on the pulse of things. And then, you know, it is definitely one of those things which is, you know, it could be really tragic for the scene, or it could be like really cool.
I think about it like it's kind of weird that you say that, because I'm like, everyone's sort of older. It's in the scene now, like from owners to promoters.
Yeah.
And their whole digital marketing things made it easier for people who are older to continue to own their audience. When we were doing it was all community and culture.
Yeah.
And there's no real young kids coming through, but I'm sort of much the same. It's probably easy for me to say now that I've stepped out a little bit.
Yeah.
But I'm like, they got to come through. Like they have to, for the sake of the industry.
Yeah.
Because when I remember when I was coming up, all the guys who were above me were the same age as I am now.
Yeah.
So it's like, it sort of seems to be that 15 to 20 year gap of rotation.
Yeah.
And then the older guys turn into venue owners and they do whatever. But it's like, we're not really seeing that, but hopefully we do. Hey, Dave, I'm unfortunately going to have to end this one today, but thank you so much for coming down.
Cool.
I want to shout out my sponsors that make this happen, which is, believe it or not, my own brand, WP Shots, who Dave stocks at his venues. Thank you for the support.
I think we've got nearly all of your brands in the venues.
Yeah, so you're a big supporter of 80 Proof. So I want to thank them because they're our sponsor today, and without them, this wouldn't happen. I'm going to send you guys out some boxes for your time today.
Cool.
And I wanted to say thank you for coming down and having a chat. It was super interesting, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.